the most important issues for you in this presidential election year?
It's absolutely the economy. I mean, the country's really struggling right now.
Economy.
The economy.
Of course, the economy, and then the illegal immigration.
The Obamacare, the health care. I think that looking at putting however many million that they talked about on health care is going to be they're looking at the way that the taxes are nowadays, that it's just going to be a burden on those of us that do pay the taxes.
Are there particular things that you most want to be hearing from these Republican candidates about how they'll turn the economy around?
Yeah, I think overburdensome regulations is a big factor for anybody who wants to start a small business.
And between Mitt Romney and Newt Gingrich, they're obviously the front runners in Florida. What are your observations about the way they've been?
I don't like Newt Gingrich at all.
We're either looking at Newt Gingrich. He's got experience balancing the budget, in Congress before. And then the other choice is Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney's run Bain Capital. He has a great deal of personal wealth. He definitely understands how money works.
I feel like Newt understands the issues. He's brilliant.
Do you think these are good candidates for the Republican Party?
No, I think there are better candidates out there.
To be honest, I think the negative attacks from Mitt Romney and the personal attacks against Newt Gingrich are really turning me off personally.
Mr. Gingrich.
And when did you decide on Newt Gingrich?
A long time ago. Yeah, I admire him.
I kind of feel that Barack Obama is going to win again. I feel like he came into a situation, I feel like he's doing his best. I didn't vote for him, naturally. I'm a Republican. But I feel like he's doing the best with the mess we're in. I'm just hoping it doesn't get any worse. That's what I worry about.
Welcome to World Channel's live coverage of the 2012 Florida Republican primary. I'm your host, Philip Martin, and I'm joined in the studio by Peniel Joseph, professor of history at Tufts University. And joining us via Skype from Florida is David Royce, editor of the News Service of Florida. But to kick off our conversation, we have reporter Anna Sell from our political coverage and online partner, WNYC. It's a freecountry.org. Anna, we just heard a few of the voices you captured this week. Tell us, what's the mood in Florida? What issues or messages are resonating with voters? Anna, can you hear us? Oh, okay, well, look, we're going to join Anna in a few minutes, but let's turn to Dr. Peniel Joseph here from Tufts University. You've been following this election very closely. What issues do you think are resonating with voters?
Well, in terms of the Republican electorate is thinking about everything from deficits, Obamacare, illegal immigration, but the number one issue is really the economy, how to turn around chronic unemployment. Okay,
I think we might have Anna. Anna, are you hearing us from Florida? Okay. So Dr. Joseph, now unemployment, obviously, in South Carolina we had. The issues were largely social issues. In Florida, of course, you have this extraordinary population of white voters, Jewish voters, Latinos. It's a very diverse population. I guess, and different issues to different people. What do you think was the most resonant issue?
Well, I think the biggest issue is among the Republican base is somebody who can win, electability. People want somebody who can oppose the president in the fall and win. So sometimes people will say they believe in what Gingrich is saying culturally and socially as this cultural social conservative who's tried to run in the mold of Ronald Reagan. He's saying he's the true heir to Reagan. But they think that Mitt Romney, in terms of electability, so the pragmatism, in a way this is similar to 2004 when John Kerry and John Edwards in the Democratic primaries were running against each other. Many Democratic primary voters were sort of in love with John Edwards, who came in second, but they would say their hearts went with Edwards, but their minds went with Kerry when they were thinking about electability.
Well, David, let me ask you this, talking to David Royce. What do you find, what have you found to be most resonant in Florida in terms of what voters are thinking and why they're choosing between Mitt Romney largely and Newt Gingrich?
Well, your montage in your intro pretty much captured it. It's the economy. And I would agree with Dr. Joseph that there is a large group of moderate Republicans, a pretty diverse group of moderate Republicans around Florida that are concerned about electability. But I think the economy, over and over again, you heard that, and they were hearing it today in the exit polls. It's the economy. It's who can get the country back on track. Florida's got 10% unemployment, which is a little higher than a lot of the rest of the country, and I think the people who were more concerned about those social issues were sort of drowned out today by those people, the more pragmatic voters who just want somebody who can get the economy going.
Now, when you talk about social issues as opposed to, if you will, more pragmatic issues relative to the economy, what social issues found resonance in places where you found this population of Republicans?
Well, I'm not sure, because there weren't very. Again, I was looking at a map here just a second ago of, what the count is in the exit polling, and Romney. The only places where Gingrich is registering is in a lot of sort of small rural areas. They tend to be more conservative, but they don't have a lot of voters. If you look at the voter-rich I-4 corridor, roughly Daytona Beach to the Tampa Bay area, Romney easily won in all of those counties that stretch sort of across the middle of the state there, including Orlando. So it's hard to say what the sort of social conservative voters are looking for,
and it probably doesn't even matter. I mean, when you look at the results that are coming in right now, David, you have Romney with 60% of the vote in. You have Romney with 48%, capturing 48% of this vote, and Newt Gingrich 31%. Now, of course, the polls seem to suggest that, but are you surprised a little bit by this, given what we saw coming out of South Carolina?
Yeah, I guess a little bit. I mean, it was a topsy-turvy kind of week. Coming out of South Carolina, suddenly there was the Gingrich surge, and there seemed to be a lot of excitement around Gingrich. But that moderated as the week went on, and we went right back to where we were, before South Carolina, which was Romney with a heavy lead in Florida. And I guess I'm a little surprised at how quickly that sort of spiked up and went back down. But I've always thought that Florida was basically Romney's to lose. The electorate here sort of looks for candidates that tend to be moderating. Florida is sort of famously diverse, and that's one of the reasons the leaders here wanted to move our primary so early.
Well, David, one thing is, by the way, CNN has just announced that Romney has won this. It's over in terms of Florida. Now, when I say talk about the social issues being less important, according to a number of commentators and some early exit polls I saw today, economics seems to have trumped some of the social issues. So how does that figure into a Romney win as opposed to a Gingrich's lackluster, if you will, performance comparatively?
Well, I think some of those voters who tend to be interested in the social issues, who sort of vote on those social issues, I think many of them also happen to be evangelical Christians who did not like Romney in large numbers. I think their votes went to Gingrich, but just the fact that Romney has so overwhelmingly defeated Gingrich in the primary sort of shows that wasn't the message that carried the day. And again, I go back to the exit polling. I mean, almost everybody who came out of the polls today was saying, I'm concerned about the economy.
Well, Dr. Joseph here in studio was saying that they were mainly looking for someone who can beat Barack Obama, President Obama. And that may have been the overriding issue. Economics, of course, but they're looking for someone who can basically best the president in November.
I think there's some truth to that, and I mean we've certainly heard that from a lot of the leadership. And it's no secret that Mitt Romney is also not, he's not a huge favorite of a lot of Republicans. He was kind of a candidate that many of them settled on as Dr. Joseph said, the best chance to beat the president. As he also pointed out, I think there were a lot of people whose heart was with another candidate.
Right. Well, David, thank you very much. Much appreciated. We're going to turn now to Anna Sale, who's joining us from Florida. Anna? Anna?
Yes.
Hey, how are you?
Yes.
That's a great backdrop
Hi,
you have
good.
there. That's a great backdrop.
It's beautiful, isn't it?
It is. Let me ask you this question. You found some diverse voices across Florida. None of this comes as a surprise to you, I guess. One of the questions I would ask is, what is the general mood in Florida? What issues are resonating with voters there, or resonated with voters there, based on your reporting?
Well, I think what you're seeing in the exit polls is what I heard from a number of voters over the last week. The economy was the #1 issue, whether they identified as conservative social issues voters or Hispanic voters or, kind of conservative older white voters. They all said the economy, the economy, the economy. And I heard a lot that Mitt Romney was the candidate that they thought was the best to address the economy, both because of his business experience and because of his disposition compared to Newt Gingrich. So what I heard from voters is kind of what led to these big returns for him tonight.
Yet I also saw polls that showed that there was still a large percentage of Republican voters who did not find either Mitt Romney nor Newt Gingrich to be their first choice. They're still waiting for a savior.
Mitt Romney only recently took back the lead.
Perhaps, but I think it's interesting if Mitt Romney ends the night with more than 50% of Florida Republicans supporting him. I think there'll be an interesting conversation tomorrow, because what the early exit polls at least show is that 7 out of 10 voters who turned out today identified as conservatives. And the argument all along from the candidates who are running against Mitt Romney has been, I can be the conservative alternative to Mitt Romney. If Mitt Romney wins big here in Florida and conservatives made up 70% of the folks who turned out to polls, that begins to undercut that argument.
Now, let me turn to our guest here in studio again, Dr. Pernille Joseph, Tufts University. Now, you just heard from Anna in Florida about the type of turnout we've had and the type of voters who have come out for Mitt Romney in this case. Now, does this foreshadow if you will, a Mitt Romney romp in the country in the coming primaries, in your view?
Well, I think in February he's going to do very, very well, but I still think there's a kind of split here. In a way, this is reminiscent of when Pat Buchanan ran. Pat Buchanan was the conservative, 1992, the conservative cultural warrior opposing a more moderate Republican in terms of George Herbert Walker Bush. Gingrich is that to Mitt Romney. Gingrich is saying that I'm the real standard bearer for Ronald Reagan, and I don't want a Massachusetts liberal to be the party standard bearer.
Okay. Now, we're going to turn now to Joe Kotkin. Professor Kotkin, how are you doing?
Hello?
How are you doing?
I'm doing fine.
Excellent. Well, I don't know if you've heard some of the discussion here, but
all of it, yes.
Okay. Now, the situation in Florida, Florida in many ways is a microcosm of the United States, given its demographics. What lessons do you think have come out of this particular primary that we might be that might apply to the rest of the country in the coming weeks and months, if you will, in terms of this primary season, in terms of the candidates' issues?
Well, first of all, I just want to, and I think this is an important point. People are always trying to say that I'm picking up the Reagan mantle. I hate to say it because of, but I knew Ronald Reagan, and I Ronald Reagan. Newt Gingrich is not Ronald Reagan. You can say you're the next Ronald Reagan without being. There was something very solid about Reagan. He had none of the kind of baggage that Gingrich had. As soon as he could get out of Washington, he moved to California. He didn't hang around and feed off like a parasite like Gingrich did. So I don't think that works. I think what it tells us is Gingrich cannot make the case that he's, in quote, the true conservative. And frankly, I'm just astounded that evangelical Christians, given what they say they believe in, would vote for a guy like Gingrich. I don't think he's got staying power as the conservative candidate. And so in a funny way, I think this shows that Romney can sort of win by default just by not being Gingrich. and being the last man standing.
Okay, Joe Calkin, presidential fellow at Chapman University. Let's go to Anna Sales to see if she can also comment a bit on what you're talking about. One of the things I'm concerned about, or one of the questions I have, is that this was an extraordinarily negative campaign. How much damage has this done to the Republican Party, not just to the candidates, but to the brand going into the next election? What's been your experience, Anna, on the ground?
Well, it's been interesting because yesterday, talking to voters at a Romney rally held in Pinellas County, there was a lot of grousing about the negativity of the campaign, but folks said, you know, this is bad, this is not what Republicans do, and I don't like it one bit. But then folks were still planning on turning out for Mitt Romney, who has been, you know, part of that negativity. And so, you know, it seemed to certainly work for Mitt Romney tonight.
You're talking about negative campaigning.
He personally has been negative campaigning. It's the most negative he has been in this primary season personally. Of course, the super PACs in Iowa hammered on Newt Gingrich, but Mitt Romney getting on stage and directly personally attacking Newt Gingrich, that led to a big win here in Florida. So voters may say they don't like it, but you know, Romney had a big night.
At the same time, it pushed Mitt Romney's negatives up considerably among independents and among general election voters. Have you seen that? Has that been reflected in any way in your coverage in Florida?
You know, I think that's something we have to pay very close attention to as we think about what these results mean. Florida is a closed primary, so we're only hearing from registered Republicans. Come November, what we care about are the swing voters in Florida, and a big part of that are those who don't claim any party, who are registered independents. They didn't participate in this primary. And for the most part, when I talked to independent voters, you know, they didn't like what was happening. There was a real sense of ambivalence about President Obama, and also none of the Republican candidates were exciting them either. But I got the sense that because they weren't participating in this primary, they're just going to watch through the summer, watch through the early fall, and it'll be several months before they start deciding which way they're going to go.
Well, let's turn our attention to one of the biggest economic issues in Florida, foreclosures. Now, housing prices have plummeted 45% since 2006, but voters have told us they haven't heard any solutions from either party.
My house in 2006, and at that point I was married and had a double income.
They put my home in foreclosure. They wouldn't budge in reference to trying to give me a loan modification. I'm a single mom with 3 kids. I served in the military proudly.
In 2005, I bought a house for myself and a rental house. This was during the peak of the market. What happened over a couple of year period was homes that were going at a certain price now are at a place half that.
Are there many people, I mean, that you know in Tampa that are facing similar difficulties?
Yes, I have someone at my job who's going through the same thing.
I have about 6 friends going through the same process. Single moms who are going through foreclosure right now. Just can't get rid of our houses. Everything's underwater. I think we're all scared and hurting.
In the beginning, when this all happened, what I would hear a lot from homeowners, and I've sat at a lot of kitchen tables and held a lot of hands, in the beginning they would say they were just so bamboozled by it, you know, and they would just say, well, the government has to do something.
The government doesn't have a clear-cut strategy for getting the 1 million+ homes that are out there through this.
You felt like President Obama has done enough at this point?
Well, I think that President Obama could have done more, but I think that he had a lot of issues with the Republican Party just fighting him tooth and nail.
Do you still consider yourself a supporter of the president?
I will never be a Republican. I don't know what will happen when the election comes. If there was an independent, I may vote for an independent, depending on what their policies and ideas were.
Do you know who you're going to vote for?
Well, I have a favorite. I think it's Mitt Romney. I think he has the balance of business experience, general electability.
For Republican, Democrat, you know, do you sort of know where you might end up?
I don't love anybody. I'm not loving anybody. I'm listening to, I'm just listening, just pay attention, just watching, hearing, listening. I'm not going to make up my mind until probably the very end.
Now, Anna, in our South Carolina coverage, one of the things we found was that social issues were at the forefront in everyone's mind. But here, of course, people seem to be focused squarely on economic issues. Foreclosures, as you pointed out here, are a huge issue. What's the takeaway for you on the issues between South Carolina and Florida comparatively?
Well, it's a different world. I mean, South Carolina, you would ask Republican voters about what was sort of motivating their vote, and you'd hear a lot about religion. You'd hear a lot about sort of secularism, not trusting the direction socially that President Obama was taking the country. I didn't hear that from a single voter, and I was in lots of different parts of the state. And the number one thing when I asked, what do you care most about? It was the economy. And it's not hard to see why here in Florida. Unemployment just ticked under 10% in December. It's at 9.9%, higher than the national average. And they saw the lowest of the lows in the foreclosure crisis here. I mean, some of those voters that you just heard from, we arrived in Tampa and I started asking around, just kind of asking for general impressions. Do you know anyone in foreclosure? And it was so easy to find people who had been personally affected, to the point where a woman actually piped in when I was in a cafe and just sort of shouted across the room, oh, I'm in foreclosure. But then it's not clear how that's affecting people's politics. The voters we just saw, 2 were registered Democrats, 2 were registered Republicans, and they definitely saw kind of the government response through the prism of those partisan politics, but it didn't really, you know, there's ambivalence about President Obama, there's ambivalence about the Republicans, and a lot of cynicism. But I didn't see people radically switching from, you know, I'm never going to vote for President Obama again, I'm never going to vote for Mitt Romney because I don't trust Republicans. I didn't hear any of that. It's just generally a sense of cynicism about the ability of Washington to help solve their problems.
Now, to expand a little on economics and the foreclosure crisis in Florida, I'm pleased to be joined by Tia Mitchell from the Tampa Bay Times. Tia, how are you? Tia, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Excellent. Well, I don't know if you just heard Anna talking about the economic situation in Florida. What have you found in your reporting?
Things that I've found is that it is an economic issue, and it's not as cut and dry as many of the panelists have said before, because, you know, Florida's economy is based on tourism, and then another big driver of the state budget is property tax revenue. And so, of course, with the economic downturn, it's affected property values, and it's also affected tourism. And so it's caused budget deficits for repeated years. And again, Florida being a swing state, yes, the conservative movement is very big here in Florida, but at the same time, it's a very diverse state politically and ideologically as well. So it's not one kind of thinking about what should or could be done in Washington to solve the problem.
But of course, a lot of people have lost their homes, and I'm wondering, those who've lost their homes, whether they be Republicans or Democrats, do they see any salvation in any of the candidates who are running?
I think it's just, as said before, it just depends again on your own political kind of base first, and then because there are a lot of Democrats who say President Obama again has been, you know, there's gridlock in D.C. and there's a Republican-led House that doesn't want to see him succeed, but at the same time, there are also conservatives who really believe that President Obama is the wrong leader for the university, and that his ideas are wrong for America. And those are the people that are trying to find the best candidate that could unseat President Obama come November.
Well, one question, what about income inequality? When this campaign began, at least Newt Gingrich came into Florida talking about Bain and Company and Mitt Romney's 15% tax rate in the Cayman Islands. Have people talked about that, or they're more interested in, as you pointed out, the economics right at home?
Again, I think that it's interesting because you have people who support Romney and they say, you know, what's wrong with being an astute businessman? What's wrong with making money an honest way and being a successful business person? That's exactly, Governor Rick Scott didn't say who he voted for, but kind of the educated guess that a lot of members of the media have made is that he did support Romney. And he did make a statement just saying, you know, we should encourage business and there's nothing wrong with being a successful businessman. But on the same, you have others who say, he's part of the 1% and he's out of touch, and that's a lot of baggage to carry into a general election.
Now, I don't know if you know this or not, but how has Mitt Romney done in your area, in Tampa, which was considered sort of at least the surrounding area, Republican stronghold?
Last I looked, which was about half an hour ago, Romney led the vast majority of Florida counties, including the I-4 corridor, including the Tampa Bay area. He had carried, I think, nearly all of those counties. And it seemed to me, even looking at the debates, there was one in Tampa and then one in Jacksonville over the past week. And it seemed to me that kind of the momentum was getting behind Romney.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Tia. Now, we're going to get a little deeper into the economic issue, but before doing so, I'd like to just turn to Peniel Joseph for a second and ask you what you thought about what you just heard.
Well, I think it just shows you that in terms of Republican primary voters, they want electability. When we think about independents in the fall, what's very interesting is that independents actually don't know what to think. Mitt Romney's not really offering some kind of housing solution, and it seems like the president's housing solution has been ineffectual so far. In the State of the Union, he announced yet another plan to make sure that people were paying a $3,000 mortgage owner deduction, right, for mortgages that are underwater. But so far, there's been no solution to the million-plus homes that are underwater.
Okay, well, let's take a look at the economics a little bit more. To help us look more broadly, we're joined by Joel Kotkin. Again, he's the presidential fellow at Chapman University, and Carol Markovich, who is a blogger for WNYC's It's a Free Country and columnist for the New York Post. Now, Joel, let's turn to you again, and then again, and after that to Carol. But economics, so far we're talking about a campaign that began talking about income inequality and the deficit, but that doesn't seem to have played broadly into this, I should say specifically into this campaign. Or am I misreading it in your view?
My sense of it is that what people want is somebody who can turn the economy around. And, they may be upset about inequality. They may be upset about the budget deficit. But fundamentally, it's getting the economy going. And, Romney's whole appeal has got to be, I know what I'm doing. I'm competent. And President Obama isn't. And, President Obama has had a pretty poor record economically. And that's the only thing that Romney can run on is on the idea that he can fix the economy. Does he have compelling ideas? No. Has he made a case of that? No. But I think that that's where he's strong. And I think that what we're also seeing is, to some extent, the beginning of the decline of the other issues. And I think your reporters have been really good on that. I think the religious right issues have gone the way of anti-communism. There's a fringe group that cares about it in a few states, but people are focused on the economy. And if Romney can give off this aura of competence,
okay, well,
I think that's the thing that's going to take him.
Well, Joel, competence, however, and Carol, let me ask you this question. Joel pointed out that Mitt Romney is being lauded for competence. They seem to view him as the competent candidate. Now, has competence indeed trumped ideology in this campaign? It seems to, but what's been your observation?
I think it's more that all the candidates are sort of the same. If you had a candidate that was pro-choice, all of a sudden all those issues would be...
Wait a minute, I have to stop you. Sort of the same. You actually see comparisons? Similarities between Mitt Romney and Newt Gingrich?
Oh, absolutely. I think they're both moderates, and they don't have a very wide range of difference between them on most issues. The thing that Romney gets most hammered on is Romney Care. It's not that he is pro-choice, because he's not. Yes, he may have had a late-in-life conversion, but so did Ronald Reagan, and that's fine. If they had a wide range of difference between them on social issues, we would see social issues be more of an issue, more of an issue in this campaign. But because there really isn't a lot of air between them, it hasn't been that important. So it comes down to other things.
Well, the issue that seems to have been most debated by these two candidates is that of immigration, which we'll get into later. You wrote a piece this past week in the New York Post talking about self-deportation, a term that was initially ridiculed by Newt Gingrich when Mitt Romney brought it up. Why do you find that this is a viable concept as expressed by Mitt Romney?
You know, I don't know that it's going to be a viable concept, but what we're doing now,
can you explain it first of all?
Yeah, sure. The idea is you enforce existing immigration laws and make it hard for people who are here illegally to work, to live, to get driver's licenses, to get apartments, and they end up self-deporting. And under Mitt Romney's plan, they would have an easier track to get back into the country if they leave and apply to come in legally. Whether or not that would work, I don't know. But the current thing that we're doing is nothing, so that doesn't really work. And somebody like Rick Santorum, who kind of alluded to the fact that we can round up immigrants and send them back to Mexico because it's not such a bad country. After all, it's not Siberia. That can't work either. So the self-deportation, while not the best solution in the world, is really the only compromise that is available on the table right now. It's either doing nothing or shipping everybody home, which neither one of those make any sense. So the middle ground is sort of enforce existing laws, secure the border, and give the people who have been here an opportunity to come in legally.
Now, Joel, if I could turn to you again. Now, in South Carolina and in Iowa, immigration was being hammered. That is to say, illegal immigration was being hammered by both candidates. And when I say both, obviously there's more than one candidate. But right now, it seems like there's only two of them: Newt Gingrich and Mitt Romney.
You're going to raise the ire of the Ron Paul supporters.
Of course. and that's not to dismiss the other candidates. But in terms of Florida, that seems to be the tussle that we've been focused on. Now, Joel, again, my question. Oops, guess what? Romney has come to the podium. We're going to join CNN at this point.
Guys. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you to the people in this room and to the people all over Florida. Thank you tonight for this great victory. There are fewer candidates tonight than when the race began, but three gentlemen are serious and able competitors, and they're still in the race, and I want to congratulate them on another hard-fought contest in this campaign. Primary contests are not easy, and they're not supposed to be. As this primary unfolds, our opponents in the other party have been watching, and they like to comfort themselves with the thought that a competitive campaign will leave us divided and weak. But I've got news for them. A competitive primary does not divide us, it prepares us, and we will win. And when we gather back here in Tampa 7 months from now for our convention, ours will be a united party with a winning ticket for America. You know, 3 years ago this week, a newly elected President Obama faced the American people and he said, look, if I can't turn this economy around in 3 years, I'll be looking at a one-term proposition, and we're here to collect. And you know the results. I mean, it's been 35 months of unemployment above 8%. And under this president, more Americans have lost their jobs and more home foreclosures have occurred than under the administration of any other president in history. And in the last 10 days, I met with a father who was terrified that this would be the last night his family would be able to sleep in the only home his son has known. I've met seniors who thought these would be the best years of their life, and now they're worried day to day about how to make ends meet. I met some Hispanic entrepreneurs who thought they'd achieved the American dream, and now they're seeing it disappear. In his State of the Union address, the president actually said these words. He says, "Let's remember now how we got here." Don't worry, Mr. President. We remember exactly how we got here. You won the election. Leadership is about taking responsibility, not making excuses. In another era of American crisis, Thomas Paine is reported to have said, "Lead, follow, or get out of the way." Well, Mr. President, you were elected to lead. You chose to follow. And now it's time for you to get out of the way. I stand ready to lead this party and to lead our nation. As a man who spent his life outside Washington, I know what it's like to start a business. I know how extraordinarily difficult it is to build something from nothing. I know how government kills jobs, and yes, I know how it can help from time to time. My leadership helped build businesses from scratch. My leadership helped save the Olympics from scandal and give our American athletes the chance to make us all proud as they did. My leadership cut taxes 19 times and cast over 800 vetoes. We balanced the budget every single year, and we kept our schools first in the nation. My leadership will end the Obama era and begin a new era of American prosperity.
Okay, I'm talking to Peniel Joseph of Tufts University. Now, you've just heard it from Mitt Romney. It seems like we've just entered the general election.
No, absolutely. I mean, that's the speech of a presumptive nominee. It's an attempt to try to consolidate the party. That's a big picture speech. That's a forward-thinking and a forward-looking speech. I love the quote from Thomas Paine. Like Reagan in 1980 and 84, one of the interesting things that Romney's trying to do is really talk about American prosperity. One of the great things about Ronald Reagan, the great communicator, was that he was a transformative president. And this president has said the same thing. Barack Obama, as a candidate in 2008, said Reagan fundamentally altered American democracy in a way that Bill Clinton didn't. But what Reagan really tapped into was the spirit of optimism. Right? And again, there was a dark side.
Morning in America.
Morning in America. There was a dark side to Reaganism, of course, in terms of poverty, unemployment, South African apartheid, all these different things. But Reagan's narrative was one that, the 1960s had really destroyed the optimistic America, welfare, the Great Society. He wasn't anti-civil rights in terms of the Civil Rights Acts and the Voting Rights Acts, but he certainly wasn't a vigorous enforcer. Reagan launches the neoconservatives and Clarence Thomas and others who really are against affirmative action, against a certain kind of civil rights enforcement. When we think about Romney with the flags over here, the whole thing about American prosperity and American optimism, it's very Reagan-esque. This is a big picture, forward-looking speech.
Now, Anna, in Florida, you just heard from Peniel Joseph. You heard Mitt Romney, looking presidential, some would argue. What did you hear in his speech? I don't know if you just heard that or not. But in his speech, he basically has basically started the general election, and it seems he's thrown the gauntlet down to President Obama.
Well, I would say he's trying to restart his general election contest against Barack Obama. You'll remember back to the New Hampshire victory speech, it was all about Barack Obama. And so this Florida primary is when we saw Mitt Romney kind of jump off that script and start addressing directly his Republican rivals. Now he's back to just bring it directly to President Barack Obama with this big victory tonight.
It's a restart, if you will. It's a restart, it seems, because in New Hampshire, of course, that was one thing, but his game was thrown off in South Carolina. Now, Florida also gives us the first opportunity to dive deep into the Latino vote. And of course, immigration has the potential to be a huge wedge issue.
All the issues that the presidential candidates are talking about, what are some of the most important issues to you this year?
I'm original from Brazil, and what I see for a lot of Latin people, it's like the immigration situation, especially here in Miami. We have a lot of people from like all the different places, you know.
The immigration discussion has to be discussed, whether it's a Democrat in office or a Republican in office. It has to be addressed.
To just let people stay because they're here, that's not right.
Give me a lay of the land of the sort of diversity of the Hispanic vote in Florida.
For the most part, the Cubans, who are mostly concentrated in South Florida, are largely Republican and have been very successful in investing themselves in the Republican Party.
Historically, if you look at the Latino family or the Hispanic family, their values are conservative values. Strong family, bonded family, religious, hardworking. The only thing that separates the Latino vote from the Republican Party is the immigration issue.
The rhetoric is much too harsh. You heard today Mitt Romney and Newt Gingrich much more mellow on the immigration issue. But when you hear them in Texas and when you hear them up in Nebraska, you hear them talking about fences and an anti-cultural tone to the tone of voice. But that doesn't mean the message of the Republican Party that is a small government, limited role in government, does not resonate in the Hispanic community. It's just not being delivered.
Okay, let's get a little deeper into the immigration issue. Now, joining us via Skype is Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Carlos Harrison. Carlos, how are you?
I'm good tonight. We're watching some interesting results come in. What's most interesting, I think, is that they're almost exactly matching the polls, which is not always the way it works in this one.
Well, yeah, the polls have been remarkably accurate. Now, look, the immigration issue, I'm not sure how much resonance it had. We saw this report from Anna Sell, and I'm not sure how much resonance the immigration issue has in a community that is largely Cuban. But let me ask you, how has that issue played in the context of this particular primary?
You know, I think Marco Rubio put it very well the other day. He was talking about this, and he said, you know, all of us are immigrants, whether it's ourselves or one generation removed or been here for 3 generations. But even more importantly, especially among Hispanics, you can be Cuban American and it may not touch you directly because you have special status. But the fact is, we all know someone. This is an area that has Colombians, Venezuelans, Nicaraguans, Mexicans, everyone. And I'm hearing from a lot of people, it may not affect me directly, but I know someone it does and I care. So it does resonate, and it's going to actually resonate even more as they move out into some of those western states.
Well, you know, one thing that seemed to have backfired on Newt Gingrich was coming out with an ad and describing Mitt Romney as anti-immigrant, saying he was anti-immigrant. And I'm saying it seemed to have backfired. Is that observation correct?
Well, I don't know. There might be a couple different ways to view that. I think it backfired when, again, Senator Marco Rubio, not directly, but through some friends, suggested that that ad should come down right away, that it was just throwing fuel on the fire, and that was not the kind of flames that the Republican Party needed to fan.
Now, percentage-wise, the largest Latino population concentration is in the Miami area and in Broward County. What about other parts of the state? How did the Latino vote play out in terms of mid-Florida, the Tampa area, in terms of the north, and in terms of the various groups, Cuban and Puerto Rican, predominantly?
Well, we're just watching, again, some of the exit polling research come in, you know, and that'll be coming out through the night and everything else. It's almost certain that South Florida, where you have the greatest concentration of Hispanic Republicans, and of those, the greatest number being Cuban Americans, that they went for Romney. That was not really ever a question in any of this. Central Florida, again, you're dealing with the Republican Hispanics right now, and that may not be representative of the same kind of voters that you're going to be dealing with come the general election. There, it's more Puerto Rican. There's some other groups, Mexican American and things like that. And a lot of those may be leaning more towards Democrat. There, you're going to be looking at independents and people who are disaffected or disappointed with President Barack Obama's so far what his policies have brought them.
Well, Carlos, thank you. I mean, before I bring in our next guest, I'd like to thank you for joining us. And right now, however, any election is about the future. So I want to bring in two young politically active voices. Gus Portella, he's the Midwest Regional Vice Chairman of the College Republican National Committee. And Dominique Glenn, she's president of the Florida College Democrats. Welcome to both of you.
Good to be here.
Thank you.
Now, I don't know if you heard, had a chance to hear Carlos talk about the Latino vote, but I would like to ask you some general questions about the youth vote, if you will. Young people, this is just an observation, don't seem to have been as animated about this Republican primary as we've seen with the Democratic primary in 2008. Is that fair to say? Dominique, let me just turn to you first. What's your view of that?
Well, honestly, I would agree with you. I'm actually Skyping in from the Orlando office for the Obama campaign. And, you know, the fact that we spend so much time here, there are always young people coming in and out. Folks are excited. We have students active all across our campuses, and we just haven't seen the same from our counterparts in the same parts of the state. So I think if you're looking for which party is engaging the youth, which candidates are exciting our young voters, I would have to say it's definitely President Obama, and that's just because our field plan right now is incredibly inclusive, and it's something that students can easily engage themselves in.
Now, Dominique Gillin, we would expect you to say that. Now, Gus, my view, however, I mean, to you, I would assume you have a different view.
Well, absolutely, I do. I'm not sure if you've seen the recent statistics, but the youth has every reason to really get excited about really questioning President Obama's policies over the past 3 years. As you may have known, recent studies have shown that 14.8% of young people are currently unemployed. And that's between the ages of 20 to 24, which is right around the years they're done with college and throughout college. So I would have to disagree on that one, simply because there's no future for the youth out there. Right after you're done with college, there's certainly hardship. You're out there looking for a job, and it's tough. It's a tough economy.
Well, Gus, this question now, because President Obama was just in Michigan, and he got a rousing reception in Ann Arbor. And though you're correct about the disenchantment, he seems to still be doing fairly well in terms of his popularity among young people. How do you contest that in a general election, which will likely be Mitt Romney and Barack Obama?
Well, I would say that his approval rating amongst the youth has changed. So I wouldn't be too excited yet as the candidate, just because in 2009 when he came into office, President Obama came in with a 75% approval rating, and as of last October, he's now sitting at 45%. So there's growing disenchantment amongst the youth, saying President Obama has not exactly done what he promised over the last 3 years. And as Mitt Romney stated tonight, there's always that one-term proposition that he talked about 3 years ago during his fall campaign.
Now, Carol, let me join you in New York. You just heard Gus, you heard Dominique. It is true that President Obama's approval rating is lower than it was certainly in 2008. That's something we would expect. But in terms of the youth vote and in terms of Latino vote, two major constituents that supported Obama, how will the Republicans, in your view, capture or put a dent into that vote? And it's a question I'll throw to Joel also in a few seconds.
Well, I think you have to think about the fact that 4 years ago, the people that voted for Obama were 18. Now they're 22. As Gus said, they're jobless. It might not be as cool to vote for Obama anymore. They no longer have the cool T-shirt. So it's really changed. Obama came in promising, I mean, these really outlandish things, lowering the oceans. I mean, even on a lesser level, ending Guantanamo. Campaigned against the Bush tax cuts. He just came in and he really didn't do any of those amazing things that he planned to do. Even Obamacare, which I think is a terrible plan and it's going to cost so much money and it's just awful. He actually didn't get the main things that he campaigned on, like single payer. So he really hasn't been that successful. So it'll be interesting to see if he gets the youth vote. I think the youth is generally, they do lean left. It's a mistake many of us make in our youth. So as they get older, they probably will move more to the right and become more conservative. So we'll see. It really, even if Obama manages to capture a large part of the youth vote, I don't think that means the election's over.
Now, Jill, you've been following this too. You just heard from Carol. Obviously, there's going to be some disenchantment, but is it as bad as Carol just pointed out?
I'm not sure it's disenchantment to the level of voting Republican, but the big thing is going to be turnout. Historically, Latinos have been a group that don't tend to turn out in huge numbers. If they don't turn out in big numbers, that will certainly hurt President Obama. And the same thing with youth. Youth are a group that also don't tend to not turn out. And so I think it's more the level of enthusiasm. And I think that when I talk to my friends in the Democratic leadership, that's the thing they're worried about. They're not worried that young people and Hispanics are going to make a major shift to the Republicans. They're just worried that there just aren't going to be as many people coming out to vote. And they may very well be right. I teach on a college campus. I speak at college campuses. And it's really interesting to me how I almost never run into a young person who's an enthusiastic Obama backer. They may still prefer Obama to the Republicans, but the enthusiasm level, I think, is going to be very critical. And it's going to be very difficult for President Obama to stir those populations up. I think it's going to be one of the great challenges that he's going to face, and the unions and all the other groups who support the Democratic Party.
Now, Joe, let me turn to our studio guest, world studio guest, Peniel Joseph. Now, Peniel, you've just heard from Carol, you heard from Gus and Joel. Now, is this the main issue for the upcoming general election, or is it, as some have pointed out, a question of not so much turnout, because some expect turnout to get a little, people to become more enthusiastic as this goes on. But is it really a question of some of the mechanisms in place that might affect turnout? Some of the new legislation, for example, in states that make it more difficult to vote in terms of IDs.
Well, yeah, historically, turnout is very, very big for Democratic presidents. In 2008, Obama got 68 million popular votes. McCain got about 59 million popular votes. So in a way, that 53% was the biggest Democratic turnout since 1964. So that was huge. Right now, when we think about 2012, the youth vote went to Obama 69 to 31. In 2008, he's going to need to keep those same kind of margins. I mean, he doesn't need the same exact turnout, and the coalition
Can he keep those margins? Neither Joel nor Carol think that can happen.
Well, one, I think one of the guests said that his approval rating was 45%. That's last October. It's actually higher right now. The last polls I've seen, it's anywhere from 48 to 50%.
Now, of course, Mitt Romney's also appealing to that same group. Through Twitter, through social networking.
No, absolutely. Mitt Romney's trying to appeal to the same group, but the first thing Mitt's going to have to do is consolidate the Republican base. If Obama can reconsolidate the Democratic base and also get a good chunk of independents, that coalition that brought him in there in 2008 can be replicated. Is it going to be replicated with the same exact enthusiasm of 2008? We still have to see.
Okay. Now, Dominique, this is partly about the youth vote. A lot of people believe that this election will be contingent on the Latino vote and on the youth vote. You say you've seen a lot of enthusiasm among young Democratic voters. We haven't necessarily seen that around the country. How do you give us an example of what you've seen?
Well, I'm just going to point an example to the way the field structure is set up. In Florida, we have 11 offices across the state. We just opened 2 over the weekend. And where we don't have offices, we have neighborhood team leaders. And where we don't have neighborhood team leaders, we have a college campus with a college Democrats chapter that is excited about this election. And As you noted, I work with the College Democrats of America. I'm the director of membership, so I know that our chapters are engaged.
Well, Dominique, let me throw out this final question to you and to the rest of our guests. Now, it's not the first time we've heard this question, but we've heard it intensely in this particular election season. Is this really the most critical election the country has ever faced? I mean, let's begin with Pernell.
Well, I think it is for a number of different reasons. In 2008, President Obama took over. In 2009, he took over with the country facing the worst economic situation since the Great Depression. Tax stimulus, Obamacare, a number of different government-sponsored programs to stimulate the economy, the biggest since at least the New Deal and the Great Society.
Okay.
So when we think about 2012, we're on the road to see whether inequality persists and that gap closes between the rich and the poor, or are we going to have some measures from the government for both employment and social justice?
Okay, briefly, everyone else. Joel, what your view on that, about that question? The most important election ever?
It's absurd to even think this. There was an election in 1860, which was, I think, pretty much more important. There was an election in 1932, which I think was much more important. And you could even argue the election in 1968 was more important.
So in other words, hyperbole. We're dealing with hyperbole and histrionics in terms of how people are viewing this. Now, Carol, what's your view about that? Critical or not?
I think the most important election I've seen in my adult lifetime was 2004. I really thought it was important in a way that I just don't see this election being. Yes, we have some serious economic issues and they need to be dealt with. But no, the most important election of all time.
Okay,
no.
Carol, thank you. Gus, what's your view? Very quickly.
Absolutely. I think it's the biggest election in our generation. Compounding their struggle to find jobs, the youth, the graduating class of 2011 is also the most indebted group with an average debt of $22,900. And that's debt that we owe to
okay. Gus, thank you very much. Anna, briefly, the most important election?
Well, I think that's the question for Republican voters. Do they think it's the most important election that they come out and beat the incumbent President Barack Obama? That's a turnout question. So that's something we have to watch during the rest of the primary campaigning and the general election. Can whoever the eventual Republican nominee is build that enthusiasm?
You summed it up well, Anna. Thank you. I'd like to thank you all very much for being here tonight, and I'd like to thank our partner, WNYC's. It's a freecountry.org. Stay tuned to World Channel for continuing live coverage of the Florida primary on PBS NewsHour. For the World Channel team, I'm Philip Martin. Good night. Thank you.